Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is our Simple Abundance year. We're following along with Sarah Breathnach in her book Simple Abundance, talking all about her principles this year and what simple abundance means. We are in July 2020 now. I told you guys in the last video that we will be discussing more about solitary pursuits and just taking time for solitude, time for yourself. Because like Sarah told us, it's in those moments where we find ourselves again on this excavation of soul journey that we're on this year. We have to have those times of solitude, right? Is it sinking in yet? I know it can be a challenge. In the July 21st entry, it's called The Importance of Solitude. And we've talked a bit about this. There's a quote from Anne Marrow Lindbergh. She was an aviatrix and an author. And she says, if women were convinced that a day off or an hour of solitude was a reasonable ambition, they would find a way of attaining it. As it is, they feel so unjustified in their demand that they rarely make an attempt. Right? How is it that this time for ourselves has gotten to the bottom of the list? I suppose if you're looking at your priorities, it seems like you could still be successful and have this outward appearance of everything being together, and if anything has to suffer, it's gonna be your soul, right? But then you're just walking around as this sort of like empty shell of a person, right? Let's not let that happen. Sarah says, I believe that it's essential for busy women, by which I mean all of us, to pause a moment, this moment, to reconsider the entire subject of solitude. Too many of us approach time as if it were a frivolous, expendable luxury rather than a creative necessity. Why should this be so? Could it be that by shortchanging ourselves, the only thing impoverished is our inner life? And after all, if the lack doesn't show on the surface, if we can pull it off one more time with smoke and mirrors, why then, of course, it doesn't count, right? Or does it? Again, you could make it through and nobody would know that you're just this empty shell of a person. But what kind of life is that, right? And then Anne Marrow Lindbergh goes on to say, certain springs are tapped only when we are alone, right? So like the springs of ourselves and that authenticity and knowing who we are and recapturing the joy of living, right? The artist knows that he must be alone to create, the writer to work out his thoughts, the musician to compose, the saint to pray. But women need solitude in order to find the true essence of themselves. And she goes on to say, the problem is not entirely in finding the room of one's own or the time alone, difficult and necessary as it is. The problem is more how to still the soul in the midst of its activities. In fact, the problem is how to feed the soul. We've talked a lot about what are you really hungering for on a soul level, right? And it's not going to become aware until you do sit with yourself. So how do we do it? I talked in that other entry about finding time for creative pursuits, how Sarah hadn't really given us suggestions, but here she goes. In today's entry, July 23rd, it's called Snatch, Stolen Moments of Solitude. Yes, you have to snatch them. So Sarah says, what is needed is a plan. And she goes on to say she used to try to do it in the morning and the evening before the house stirred and then once everybody was in bed. But she was just finding that she was so exhausted in those times that it wasn't productive or soul fulfilling at all. So she also goes on to say if you work in an office, maybe you can take your lunch hour and go on a creative excursion to a museum or library, just somewhere to be alone, a cathedral or a park, she mentions. And then she says if you have to work during your lunch, which some people do, that she is encouraging you to have a bookend at the beginning and the end of your day. And she even goes on to say she has had friends who have insisted that there's no way that they could do this, but then once they implemented it, it's just become like, how did I ever live without this? You know, it's now just a part of the day. Now, if you're trying to schedule this time at home, it can be complicated, right? If you've got kids, you have a spouse that doesn't expect you to go off and be alone if you've never been that way. And she says, claim an hour in the evening after supper, after the kids are put to bed or while they do their homework, even if you spend half the time soaking in the privacy of the bathtub. Be inventive, even sneaky if you must. Why not retire an hour earlier than your partner during the week to read and relax in bed by yourself? And then she goes on to share a story about one of her high-powered career friends who was working in TV and everything, and there was just, going to bed midnight every night and no time for herself. But her solitude ended up being Saturday. She would just stay in bed all day in her pajamas and then just come out and have dinner with her husband. So that was her time. It was really like all at once at the end of the week like that. And I can appreciate, how we talked about having a personal Sabbath. If I'm able to have a personal Sabbath, then usually what I do is I wake up whenever I want. I don't set the alarm. I just go to bed the night before and I think, I can just sleep as long as I want tomorrow. Sometimes I may wake up only a little bit after what my alarm would have gone off with anyway, but it just feels so nice to just lay there. And sometimes I'll listen to YouTube videos or something else in bed and just know that I can just lay there and feel the comfort of the sheets and the blankets and everything. And so I have some solitude in the morning like that, but I can't say that I'm usually listening to something inspirational if I am listening to something, but I can't say that I'm using that time really creatively. I definitely need to carve out some more time. I'm right there with you guys, and I appreciate all your comments on the last video because I have to challenge myself to schedule the time to come up with the things that are going to bring me joy. It seems like it should just be so natural, but I have to do those things. It's self-care like we talked about. And this solitude is definitely self-care too. Oh, I like this part too. If you have kids, she says that if they have nap time, then don't be using the time while they're asleep for housework and everything, that you should take some time to renew yourself then. But then if they're older and they're beyond nap time, then after lunch, then have a, quote, quiet time where they get to go in their room and maybe they have special toys or activities that they only get to do during that quiet time, and you tell them that you'll be back in an hour and you go off and have your time. And Alice Kohler says, being solitary is being alone well. And she wrote the book Stations of Solitude. She closes by saying, being home, luxuriously immersed in things of your own choice, aware of the fullness of your own presence rather than the absence of others. So yeah, it's not about necessarily cutting everybody else out, although you need them to be gone to find yourself, but you're focusing luxuriously immersed in doing the things of your own liking, your own choice. I bet this feels like such a luxury for some people watching. I can agree. And I'm not even as busy as I ever was. I should have so much more time to do my solitary things. But not unlike the person that made the comment about just busy, busy, busy and keeping themselves busy. Somehow I still keep myself busy even when I don't have as much to do. And that is probably a coping mechanism for me too. I just need I probably need to schedule more solitary time. And I can appreciate her saying in the morning and the evening you may just be too tired. So an afternoon quiet time, sometime maybe during lunch. I know when I used to work in a setting where I had a lunch break, but people could still see that I was there, I said to everybody, I said, please act like I'm not here. Like, hold all calls. Just, I wasn't able to physically leave the building, but I said, please just act like I'm not here because I need to have this time to myself. I mean, I think back to that was a much more stressful situation than I've ever been in, but I needed that time. So, and it was only a half an hour that I got for lunch at the time. But I hope you are giving some thought to this. I so appreciate all your comments, especially on the most recent videos, because it's nice to know that I'm not alone in struggling with a lot of these things. And Sarah's right there with us too. Obviously, she's also figuring this all out. Remember she said when we were talking about being pioneers, and she said she was like our guide and she was going to be helping us get through this. I think this one about the plan for having, how are you going to fit the solitude into your life, is the perfect example, because we were kind of going, well, how do we do this? And then here we go. We have an entry about that. And then the last entry is tomorrow. I know it's a day ahead, but I'm going to just close with this one because it ties in really well with the topic. So what happens if you don't have solitude, right? Then I said at the beginning, you're kind of like an empty shell of a person, right? And, okay, so I'll read what Sarah says. She says, sufferers struggle through their days in a vacuum of unfulfilled exasperation, only to drop into bed emotionally depleted to sleep well, too emotionally depleted to sleep well at night. The littlest things can set them off, bringing tears and tantrums. Soon work and personal relationships begin to suffer. Why? Because the never refreshed are really not that much fun to be around. So true. The cycle may continue unabated until physical illness sets in. Remember the flu you had last year? 2 weeks you were laid up with lower back pain last summer, the sinus infection you couldn't shake. We don't have to make ourselves sick before we can call a psychic timeout. Unfortunately, for many women, it's only when we do get sick that we allow ourselves a dispensation of time and space alone. This may be how real life is for you right now, but it doesn't have to stay that way. If you find yourself secretly looking forward to regular rendezvous with a hot water bottle and NyQuil, then privacy deprivation syndrome is exacting a high price. That's right, I didn't read the part that she called it. Those of us who don't spend regular time alone to rest and recoup are likely to suffer from what psychologists call as, quote, privacy deprivation syndrome. Symptoms include increasing resentment, mood swings, chronic fatigue, and depression. Sound familiar? Yes, it does. And she says at the end, let me assure you there's a better path. So that's a little bit of a warning. Or maybe we're already too far gone that we already know that we're in this privacy deprivation syndrome. But we can fix it, right? So what are you going to do? Get together with your family and your significant other and say, this is my scheduled time. I need this for my own sanity. I'm going out of my mind. I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't know what I want to do. I lost myself, right? It's like I said, when I said sometimes you feel like the inner you is like screaming to get out. And imagine if you did start taking this time and you went on creative excursions. You had an hour or more a day for yourself to do things. You were practicing self-care. Imagine how different things would be. It seems like so much, I know, but it's not that much time. An hour goes by really quickly, doesn't it? And it may be like your work, you feel like, oh, I can't, I work so much, but finding those little times, like the beginning of the day, end of the day, maybe the lunch break, maybe cutting one of the days short, if your work situation allows you to do that. I really hope that you can listen to Sarah's plea and her reasoning for this. And I think that last one about physical illness, I can relate to that. Sometimes you're not listening until your body's screaming, right? Let's not let that happen. So let's go grasp some solitude and make it a part of our lives. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something great out of today's video, and please leave me a comment. I so look forward to those. Love to you all. Bye-bye.